Hello and welcome to our 39th Holding Space for Self and Others webinar. It's really lovely to have you here, whether you're coming to us live online or whether you're watching the recording at another point. My name's Jackie Short from Sydney Centre for Creative Change, and I'm really excited to welcome you here today for our special presentation with Erica Webb on movement as an act of self-kindness. And she's going to explain what that is and even guide us through some exercises today, which are not exercises, it's kindness as movement. And Erica is going to talk about the difference between those things, I'm sure, as well. Before we start today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that I come to you from today, the Eora people of the Gadigal Nation, and pay our collective respects to Indigenous elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all Indigenous practitioners who are here with us today. Special welcome. Today, we're going to be hearing a presentation, and in a moment, I'm going to share some slides with you. I'm going to share my screen just to start some slides to introduce what we're doing today, and especially to welcome Erica also. So as I mentioned, this is our 39th in our series that we've recorded and we have available for you on our website. Erica Webb is going to be sharing her ideas about movement as an act of self-kindness. Erica is a mindful movement and self-kindness coach. She works at the intersection of mind and body to shift physical tightness and tension. Her work is particularly suited to those struggling with feeling disconnected, suited to those of us struggling with feeling disconnected from or frustrated with our bodies. Combining her background in behavioural science with somatic exercise, yoga and Pilates, Erica's focus is on simplicity and sustainability in practice, which I think is often what we all need. The lighthearted, compassionate approach to movement and self-care is grounded in the reality that we're all living full and complex lives that can benefit from more of our truly human selves, not less. And you'll certainly get a sense of this lovely, compassionate approach that Erica takes in her presentation today. So welcome, Erica.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It is such a pleasure to be here. I am recovering from a bit of a cold, so I apologise if I cover my microphone and cough at any point through this presentation. But thank you so much for having me. It is such a joy to be here. I'm going to share my screen. It is also school holidays here, and I do have 2 kids at home. So if you hear any shouts in the background, that is all that's happening. So can we see that? Yes. All right. Awesome. So, as Jackie said, I'm Erica. I won't read through all of this because Jackie has just done a wonderful job of introducing me. But as Jackie said, you know, I really come at movement from this perspective of embracing our humanity. And that is very different to the way that we're taught movement and exercise growing up, right? We're taught that we kind of have this set of rules that we have to follow, and that exercise and movement is a way to control the way that we look. And really, for me, it's more about having an impact on the way that we feel. So we're going to go through a lot of that today. My background is psychology. I'm not a psychologist, but my background was in psychology. And so I've sort of blended the mind stuff with the body stuff to come up to where we're at. And I am actually just finishing my, my diploma of counselling too, which is fun. So what are we going to do today? We are going to be talking about the fact that movement is the language that our body speaks. But we very often don't listen. And part of the reason for that is we don't know what we're listening for. So we're going to talk about how do we actually listen? And then once we sort of tune our ear to that, how do we actually respond in a way that's useful? We're going to talk about the benefits of movement as distinct from exercise, because they are very different things. And the role of movement in helping us to manage that physical tightness, tension, aches and pains, and how that is truly a very important element in our personal and our professional self-care. And then we're going to discuss movement itself. I'm going to take you through a few things which I always like to give the assurance that we will not be, you know, rolling around on the floor or doing anything that you have to make space for. We'll do it sitting in a chair. So very, very accessible for everybody. And I'll give you, options as we go as well. So just some simple movement practices you can take into your day. And we're going to talk about this idea of self-kindness, fueling our movement practice, as opposed to the guilt-fueled motivation that we tend to be sold in the movement and exercise world, where it's, kind of like that never miss a Monday, no pain, no gain mentality. None of that in my world. So let's talk about this idea that our body speaks to us in sensation, and that movement is a way that we can be in conversation with ourselves. So we know for sure that our body talks to us in some way throughout the day, right? We know that we will have a sensation associated with needing to go to the bathroom. We know that we will feel thirsty when we need a drink. We know that we will get hunger feelings or pains even. And we know that when we're cold, we can go and, turn the heat up or get a jacket or something. They are all ways that our body communicates its needs to us. And we are pretty good at responding to most of those, because we kind of are like, the outcome of not responding is sort of like unacceptable to us, right? Like if we don't respond to the need to go to the bathroom, that's going to end up being a little bit problematic. If we don't eat, we get more and more uncomfortable. If we don't get a jacket when we're cold, we get more and more uncomfortable. And yet, when we are feeling tightness in our muscles, when we're feeling those aches and pains, we are very good at ignoring it. And we're also very good at blaming our body for somehow letting us down or failing us or, deteriorating in some way. And I think it's probably in part because we simply don't realize that that tightness and tension is our body speaking to us in any, much the same way as any of those other examples. Tightness and tension is your body's language to say, hey, I would love for something to change here about what is going on. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why that is, like why we get those signals. We're going to talk about that a little bit shortly. I guess the thing to think about here is that we sometimes avoid responding to those signals, partly, as I just said, because we simply don't realize that that's what our body's doing, but also because we've been conditioned to prioritize productivity and even presence, right? So in the work that you all do, your presence with your clientele is incredibly important, right? And so we're like maybe not wanting to be like, well, I need to get up and move around the room in the middle of a session because I'm tight and tense. So we have learned that there are certain things that are just kind of like not acceptable, I guess, in terms of how we respond to what we need in the moment. And so how do we work around that? We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But understanding that we are taught and conditioned truly to ignore those signals. So it's not a you problem. It's not that you've, not realized what's going on. It's something that we all kind of have been conditioned to do. You only have to look in a classroom where, we're asking all the kids to sit still for 6 hours a day to see that that's just how we all kind of exist in society. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of movement as being distinct from exercise. So exercise is really movement with a purpose in terms of creating some sort of different outcome. We might be doing it for strength. We might be doing it for cardiovascular health. We might be doing it for a bunch of different reasons. Exercise is always movement. Movement isn't always exercise. So movement is any way that we move our body, in stepping up from the couch to walk to the kitchen, in doing things like rolling our shoulders around in circles, breathing deeply. All these things are movement. And exercise has its place for sure. So sometimes when I do these presentations, I want to make it clear that I'm not, demonizing exercise, of course not. But when we think of movement as only being exercise, we really miss out on this opportunity to use it as a tool to communicate with ourselves. So what do I mean by that self-communication? It's an interesting idea. We're going to go into this a little bit more in the next couple of slides where we talk about the input to the brain. But your brain ultimately wants to know what your body is doing, and it relies on movement in order to get that information. If we stay still for a really long time, part of the reason that we experience tightness and tension is because your brain is sort of saying, oh, is that like, what's happening down there? Are we still okay? Is everything still able to function and move? And it's the act of moving that kind of sends information back to the brain to say, yeah, we're still good down here. So there's this component of communicating with ourselves through movement. We also can develop a lot of self-awareness through movement. You know, there's always this, in the yoga world, certainly, this idea of, you know, noticing how you feel. That's not always an easy thing to do because we don't always know how to listen for what it is that, you know, we're feeling. And we don't always feel like we have the tools to be in response to what we notice. So if you check in and notice, how do you feel? And you're like, well, I feel like I've got the weight of the world on my shoulders and, you know, like my teeth are glued together and my jaw is really tense, but you don't know what to do with that, then we almost shut the door to that self-awareness because we feel a little bit helpless in its wake. So that's where this next bit of self-trust starts to be developed. As we check in and we notice how we are and we respond through movement, we start to develop more self-trust because we are being in response to ourselves. It's a little bit like if, you know, every time you promised, I don't know, let's just say you were saying, everyone, I'm going to make a feast. I'm going to make a big dinner and everybody come and eat it. And everybody arrives and there's no dinner. And you're like, yeah, I'll do it next time. And you did that on repeat. People are going to start to think that you're not going to make the dinner, right? And it's a little bit like that with your body. We develop the self-trust by showing up and giving our body what it is that it needs in the moment. That can help with, we're going to come back to self-kindness in a minute, but this idea of, I guess, self-regulating, of being in response to what we need so that we don't feel at the mercy of our body all the time, or like we are only ever able to get like relief from the way that we feel when the day is over and we have an hour, right? Or when we get to the chiropractor, or when we finally get that massage, or when life isn't so complicated, or whatever it is that we're sort of looking to down the path. So we start to be able to be more, we start to develop more tools for ourselves that we can use in the moment. Self-kindness, we're going to come back to, but this idea of seeing ourselves with compassion. And when we offer ourselves kindness, we're really offering ourselves what we need. So it's not always the path of least resistance, because sometimes what we need is inconvenient. But this idea that we start to be in relationship with our body in a kind way, rather than in a more adversary relationship, which is what a lot of us have, right? Where we feel like we're just constantly trying to manage this human body that we're in, and constantly trying to control it or get it to like behave. And you might not use those words, but I think we all are probably familiar with that sort of feeling, right? And we're going to talk about this on the next slide, and I've alluded to it already, but this idea that movement is both an input to the brain and an output, which is what we're going to talk about next. But the point here is that movement is distinct from exercise. And when we stop looking at moving our body as only a way to control it, and actually start to look at it as a way that we can be in relationship with ourselves and be in relationship with our body, and actually start to see it with more kindness, I think everything changes. So this slide here is really just representative of the fact that movement is an input to our brain and an output from our brain. So if we think about this in terms of your brain, in a lot of ways is a black box, in the sense that it doesn't have a direct view, right, of everything that's happening in the body. there's absolutely signals coming to and from the brain from various, nerves and all of that sort of stuff. But a lot of that requires us to be moving in order to send the signals. And so we have in our brain a literal representation, or like a neural representation of all the different parts of our body. They're represented in the brain. And when we experience pain, when we experience tension, when our movement is perhaps a little bit more limited, that map can become a little less defined. They call it smudging in the pain research. And the idea is that the kind of outline, I guess, of the map in the way that that's represented in the neurons gets a little bit less clear. And so our control, because output, movement is an output as well, the control of movement becomes a little less clear as well. And the way that we change the output, as in that experience of tightness, tension, pain, limited mobility, is by changing the input through movement. So it's a very cool sort of circular system. We use the very thing that we're trying to change the thing we're trying to change. We move with kindness and clarity to then gain more ease and capacity in movement on the other end. Please do, jump on the chat if anything that I'm saying needs to be slowed down, sped up, elaborated upon. Just let me know. So we talked a moment ago about how movement and exercise are different things. And the unfortunate thing is that myths around exercise, I think, very much cloud our understanding of movement as well. We have this idea that in order to count, movement or exercise has to take a certain amount of time, right? So you might be like, well, a 5-minute walk's not worth it. It's only going to count if it's 15 or 20 or 30 or 60. We might think that we have to be sweating for it to count, or our heart rate has to be elevated over a certain number for it to matter. We might have this belief that if we aren't suffering from the movement or the exercise that we're doing, that we're just simply not trying hard enough. There's a gym that I used to go to when I was a bit younger that had painted on the wall, "Pain is weakness leaving the body." I'm sorry, what? Blows my mind. But we are all swimming in that messaging, always, all the time, every day. And so even if we objectively don't agree with those statements or agree with that messaging, it's in there, right? We know that that's going to be having an impact on how we view movement and exercise, because it is the very culture that we've been kind of brought up in. The other thing that we often rely on is guilt and shame. So anytime that you see any kind of movement, well, probably not so much movement, but exercise program, it's going to be relying almost always on guilt and shame to get you to do it, because it's like we think that's our only way to look after ourselves, as if we feel bad about how we look or how we behave or how we perform or whatever. And I really think that there is a much better way to motivate ourselves than relying on guilt and shame, and that is self-kindness. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. The other thing that we unfortunately believe that isn't true is that the goal is perfection in either our routine, our schedule, around movement and exercise, or that there's one perfect posture that if we could just achieve that, either sitting or standing or moving around, that we would never experience pain again. And the thing with the body is that one posture, whether it was textbook perfect or not, isn't going to be the golden answer to our tightness and tension problems, because stillness isn't the body's language, movement is. And so, yes, I'm all about mindfulness and stillness as well. But in terms of managing tension physically in the body, your body needs movement in order to be in conversation. It is just how it works. So lots of myths, I guess, that probably stop us before we even begin. Because if you believe that 30 minutes is what it takes to make a difference to the way that you feel, if you only have 5, you're not going to do anything. And in those 5 minutes, we could do something that starts to build that self-trust. We could do something that sends the signal of self-kindness and compassion towards ourselves and our body. We could literally shift some of the tension that's built up through the day. And I think with again, the work that probably most of you are doing in terms of being client facing, this opportunity to have these moments, perhaps just before a session or in between sessions, where it doesn't matter if you have 30 seconds or 30 minutes, you are actually able to do something to affect the way that you feel. And for it to feel for it to feel like an act of kindness, for it to feel like something that you're doing because you care for yourself, not because you think you should, not because, you know, someone told you that was the answer to all your problems, but rather because you want to be in a kinder relationship with yourself. You want to offer yourself more self-compassion. So the takeaway from all of that is that movement doesn't actually have to tick any boxes to be deemed worthy or enough. It literally all counts. Whether it takes you 30 seconds or 3 hours, one is not more worthy than the other. And it all counts. It doesn't have to be fancy, which is what we're going to explore together when we move. The simplest things can make such a profound difference. And that's probably another myth I could have written down, actually, is that it has to be complicated. It doesn't. Your joints just want to move through their range. It doesn't have to be more complex than that, which is pretty cool. And, you know, it doesn't have to be about getting to 10,000 steps a day unless you want it to be, that's fine. But, you know, it's not about these external metrics. It's not about stepping on a scale or burning anything off, or like, no, it's about being in conversation with ourselves, fostering that self-trust and offering ourselves what we need. And sometimes what we need is like what we need right now. And some of it is what we need for the future. So it might be like a bigger goal of reducing more pain and tension long term, but it might also be like, I'm noticing that in this moment, my left shoulder is getting tight and tense. What can I do to be in response to that? And so I think as a result of that, when we think of movement through this lens, it really is an act of both personal and professional self-care, because when we are able to be more present in ourselves and more responsive to what we need, it has certainly been my experience that I am able to be more present to the people that I work with and the people that I live with and, you know, the people in the world. So I think it is just a gift. I think it is a gift to ourselves, and I think it's a gift to the people that we are lucky enough to be in relationship with as well. So I just need to pause for a little sip of tea. Give me one moment. So this sort of comes back to, or we haven't actually talked about this, but to give it some different words. We have this way of looking at our body, and we have touched on this already, but we have this way of looking at our body like it's me versus this physical body. And it's very easy to be in an adversary relationship with ourselves. Very easy. What if it was true that instead of just trying to annoy you or get on your nerves or work against you, what if it was true that your body is actually always working for you? It is true. Spoiler alert. That is the truth. But it doesn't always feel like that. And I think the reason that it doesn't always feel like that is because we've fallen out of relationship with that natural way of communicating with our body. And I think if we believe that our body is always working for us, I think that opens the door to more self-kindness and compassion. Because if my body is trying to get my attention through discomfort and pain, because, you know, it needs movement or rest or food or whatever it might be, I have a lot more compassion for myself in the midst of my humanity, rather than believing that I'm some sort of robot who should never be in need of anything, and should always feel the same way every day and should always perform the same way every day. I think it helps us to embrace our humanness, because our needs change, and sometimes without any real reason that we can comprehend. because our body is taking in so much information. It's taking in information from inside of us that we don't really have any access to. It's taking information from our memories. It's taking information from the things that we can see. It's taking information from all of this stuff and then making a decision about how we're going to feel, what the output's going to be. And I think if we start to see it like that, then it's like, how can I be almost more in awe of myself and in awe of what my body does for me, and start to be more in relationship with that in a kind way, in a compassionate way, in a way that's like ears open to what is there here for me to notice and to move with. So we are going to do a little bit of movement together. It's not going to be a lot. That picture is a preview of one of the things that we're going to do. We're going to do a little bit of breathing together. We're going to do this movement that you can see in the picture, which is just a little bit of pelvic rocking. And then we're going to go through a few movements for shoulders. And what I really want you to think about is, notice if any thoughts come up along the way of like, well, this is too simple. Does this really count? Because this is such simple stuff. But also notice what it feels like. Notice how it feels to be using movement as a communication tool rather than simply a means to an end, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to check I can see somebody's popped something in chat. Just camera talk. Love it. Cool. All right. So let's do it. I'm just going to move myself. I'll stop sharing for 1 second too, so that I end up a little bit bigger on the screen. Oh, actually, you know what? Let's just go through this slide and then we'll move. How are we going for time? Yes, let's go through this slide and then we'll move and then we'll come back. So this idea of dropping the need or the quest for a perfect practice. It doesn't exist, so don't look for it. The perfect practice is the practice that meets you where you are on any given day. And so this idea that there might be one practice that if done every day is going to meet all our needs is probably false. I think it's really more about noticing, what do I need now? How do I want to feel? What do I want to move toward, either in this moment or longer term? And what am I committed to? I think this is a really interesting question. Am I more committed to self-kindness towards myself or productivity, for instance? And sometimes those are hard questions to answer in the moment, but something to ponder. And the thing that I want you to think about too as we go through these movements is, how could I fit this into my life in a realistic way? Many of you might already have movement practices or exercise habits. And so, you know, there might even be a sense of like, well, how does this fit? And I think when I was putting this together for you all, I was really thinking about how you could use it in your day-to-day, in between clients or in between moments in time where you're able to be in response to yourself in these little windows of time. And so my hope is that these short, small little movements that we do together help you to see that movement can happen in small windows of time. We're probably going to spend 10, 15, but it can be as brief as 30 seconds and still make a difference. Yeah. All right, let me stop sharing. Okay. I'm just going to take one more sip of tea and then I'm just going to move over to my chair. So for everyone, you're probably already sitting somewhere, is my guess. And we're just going to sit together. So, and depending on what you want, and you can maybe even let me know in the chat, we're going to do some upper body stuff, but if you feel like you need to stand up as well, let me know. I see nods for upper body. Almost always when I ask people, where are you the most tense? It's almost always shoulders, almost always. It's like the weight of the world just has a way of settling there, doesn't it? So we're going to just sit. We're going to sit on our chair and be kind of forward in it a little bit. So I'll just show you from the side. I'm not sitting right back. I want to be a little bit further forward so that there's some space. And actually, let me stay sideways for a second here because I'm going to show you something from the side. So we're going to bring our hands onto our hips and just take a moment to let your shoulders soften away from your ears and get curious about how you're feeling. So we talked about this in terms of like, sometimes it's like, I don't know, I just feel the way I always feel. But if you had to get more specific, what do you notice about, perhaps where there's tension, where there's a sense of heaviness or lightness? And we're really practicing the art of noticing through a lens of curiosity. The default is judgment, again, because that's just how brains work. The default is judgment, but can you meet yourself with curiosity? If you notice the tension or the pain, oh, isn't that interesting? Okay, I've got some information and that's useful. And then what we're going to start to do is rock our pelvis. So we've got our hands on our hips just for a second. You can drop them in a moment for sure. But we're going to think about putting a little tuck in our tail, and the tiniest one, right? So it's like you're trying to tip your pelvis backwards. And then we're going to do the opposite and a little tip of our pelvis forward. So just start this movement really small. Imagine that you were trying to make it a quarter as big as you could. So it's really little. I'm going to do it bigger just so you can clearly see what I'm doing. I'm going to arch my back as my pelvis tips forward, and I'm going to get a little round in my back as my pelvis tips back. So it's not a big movement. I don't want you to make it very big. You can build on it a little bit as we go if you like. But just noticing how that feels, and then just let your arms go so that you're not having to worry too much here about your shoulders. And we're going to start to breathe in coordination with this. So as you tip your pelvis forward and you kind of get that arch, we're going to inhale. And then as you tip your pelvis back and get that rounding, we're going to exhale. Good. So let's just do a couple more. This is a good one for anyone who has low back pain or discomfort from sitting a lot during the day. If you think about the fact that movement is an input and an output from the brain, if we spend a little bit of time giving some evidence to our brain that, hey, look, I can control this movement of my low back, our brain tends to like that, and that tends to have an impact on the output. So it's sort of fun to think about it in this way of like, we're just sending information. It's an information exchange. It depersonalizes it a little bit, but in a personalized kind of way, in the sense that it's not our body out to get us, right? It's just needs some more information. So then we're going to pause where we're in between those two places. We're not rounded, we're not overly arched, we're just in this place where there's this sense of our rib cage and our pelvis stacking on top of each other. And then we're going to take our hands, and it can be one or both, and you're just going to like sort of pat around your rib cage, just wherever you can reach, the very low part of your ribs. So just noticing that you've got, a lot of circumference there, in the sense that your ribs go all the way around. Surprise, surprise. We know this, but so do our lungs, right? Our lungs fill that space. So I want you to think about now, as you kind of just trace that space, when you've kind of got that idea in mind, you're going to drop your hands again into your lap, and we're going to breathe. And as we breathe, I want you to think about the shadow of the feeling of where you've just touched. And we're going to imagine that that was a stretchy band or belt around your ribs. And as you breathe in, you're going to try to expand that space just a little in every direction. So it's not just the front of your chest, it's the sides, it's the back, and it's right down low here in your rib cage. And we're just going to take 4 slow breaths. So you're going to breathe in and out. And often, I'm sure that you all use this tool already, in the sense that we know the power of the breath, but breathing is movement. And so simply breathing well sends really rich information to our brain. So a 30-second breathing break is a movement break. But let's just do one more. Don't know where we're up to, 4 or something. Counting isn't my strength. Good. And then let that go. And just let your body breathe. It will figure it out. We're going to drop our arms down by our sides. And we're going to take a breath in. So we actually won't keep going with that breath, actually. Let's breathe in and shrug the shoulders up towards the ears. And then as you breathe out, just let them melt. So we're not letting them just like dunk, drop, we're melting them. And you might notice that they feel like they get sort of stopped in some places and sort of go boop, 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 as they make their way down to where they started. We're just going to do this 4 times and really smooth. So as smooth as you can make it, which it won't be completely smooth because that's just not how it is. But you're just going to see, can you smooth it out a little bit? Good. Last one. Awesome. And then let's take our arms up. So we're going to do these little L's with our forearms. And I'm just going to shift my chair around. So we've got these little forearm L's. And we're going to start to bring our forearms towards each other. Now, they don't have to touch. That may or may not be possible depending on your anatomy. But we're going to think about starting to draw the inner edges of the forearms and the hands towards each other and the elbows towards each other. And you're noticing that your shoulder blades get broad as you do that. Then we're going to start to open them out. So it's like we're opening the doors. We're going to keep going and draw the elbows back a little. It's not a huge movement. And then we're going to come forward again. So we're going to add a little movement of our head. So as we open the elbows, we're going to inhale and nod our chin up just a little. And then as we bring the forearms together, exhale and nod your chin down towards your chest. Good. And we can be very quick to overemphasize this stuff. And so what I would say is use just as much effort as you need, but no more than that. What a wild concept. We're so used to going from 0 to 100. I want you to go from 0 to like 40, because you'll still go to 60, because that's just what we do. Good. All right, last one. We're going to pause with the forearms towards each other and then cross them like we're sort of like little genies. So you're going to have one of your hands under the other. So it's like they're stacked, right? And then we're going to do the same sort of movement, but now our elbows are going to come back. We're going to think about, as we squeeze our elbows towards each other on the back, our ribs don't push forward. So we're just sort of holding our rib cage nice and still. And then we're going to come forward, stack the arms and kind of reach around a little bit. So every time we do this, we're going to switch which arm is on top. Good. And your shoulders are out of your ears. And obviously, if there's any pain associated with these movements, don't do them. Good. One more. Well, actually, let's make it 2. And then let it go. Let your arms drop down. Let's do some big circles. So you're going to think about the biggest circles you could draw. If you had pencils sticking out of your shoulders, you're trying to draw some big circles on the walls beside you. So your shoulders come up towards your ears. They squeeze together behind you. They reach down like you were trying to reach towards the floor, and then they roll in towards the chest. Good. And then let's reverse that. Do 2 or 3 circles in the opposite direction. Good. And then let it go. All right, let's do one more little movement here. So give your arms a little bit of a wriggle. This is the other thing that's really lovely, is just shaking things. That's one of the ways that the body can process stress as well, and like kind of get it out of the body, the physical manifestation of it. So shaking things is great. And this is what we see animals do. So then we're going to take our arms out in front of us. So almost imagine that you were holding like a ball in your hands or something. That's about the width that your arms are apart from each other. And then we're going to start to pull one hand back towards our shoulder, nice and slow, and we're going to rotate our chest. So you can imagine you had like a bow and arrow, and you're pulling back, and our chest is going to rotate towards that same side. And then we're going to come back through center. And we're just going to switch. So as we pull that elbow back, the other arm reaches a little bit forward. And again, if you're sort of know that your default is to go from 0 to 100 or 110, really just give yourself permission to do less. Good. Let's do one more on each side. And then when you're back at center, bring your arms down and just give them a moment to totally melt. Good. You can close your eyes, you can keep them open, whatever you prefer. And let's just come back to that sense of breathing into the low part of the rib cage. So again, we've got this idea that there's this circumference there. Depending on, how, what sort of mode of thinking you go into it, you could visualize that sort of stretchy belt, you could get that felt sense of it. We're going to think about the space expanding in 3 dimensions. without the shoulders kind of becoming earrings. So shoulders stay nice and soft, and we're breathing in through your nose if you can. If you've got a cold, that might not be possible, but if that's possible, nasal breathing is preferred. You're going to breathe in and out. And let your belly be soft. Let there be a little bit of space in between your teeth. Okay. And then when you're ready to let that go, let it go and just let your breathing return to its own natural rhythm. All right, I'm going to come back down over to my floor chair. So simple movement. I teach a few different modalities, and one of them is called somatic exercise, which is partly, we've sort of partly did somatics and partly just joint rotations there. But the idea is that we're really trying to clarify, we talked about that map in our brain of our body. And one of the things that we're doing when we move in a way like that is having a direct impact on that map. So it's a little bit like, you know, if we'd colored in a picture and then we wanted to just add an outline, we're sort of just trying to clear that up. We're trying to reconnect the body and the brain with more clarity. And I don't know, there's something about that to me that made it easier to enter into a self-kind relationship with myself. Because for a really long time, the reason I do this work is because I didn't like myself at all for a very long time. And to open the door to self-kindness was hard, because when you're not in that relationship with yourself, how do you do that? And so for me, that idea that I could learn more about how my body functioned and that relationship between brain and body was key. Because suddenly it wasn't a me problem. It wasn't that I was doing everything wrong as a human. It's just that humans are complicated and it's challenging to be one, right? So I think it's that sense of shared humanity. It's that sense of shared relationship building as individuals and as a community, where we bring more of ourselves to the process. We bring more of our humanity, not less. Because if we walk around thinking that we should be robots, then anytime something doesn't feel good, what do we do with that? It means that we're the ones failing, right? Because if everybody else is robots and we don't feel the way that we thought we should, suddenly we're doing something wrong. Whereas it's like, no, if we can really understand more of our humanity, I think that we can meet it with more compassion and more kindness. And that includes how our body feels. All right, let me go back. What have I done here? What am I doing? I'm pushing the wrong button. Hang on, no one can see that, I don't think, except me. All right. So we talked a little bit about dropping this quest for a perfect practice, and what I really hope in the process of those very simple movements that we did together, that you can sort of see some opportunity for how you could pull those into just a day-to-day meeting with yourself. I, as a movement teacher, as something that I literally do every day for a living, it's very rare that you'll find me moving, in this studio for like an hour at a time. I do when I teach, but for my own personal practice, that's not how I do it. I do it in these tiny little, well, not even tiny, but minutes at a time. It's how I love to do it, because I love to be in response to myself throughout the day. Because I don't need the same yesterday as I needed the day before. Sometimes it aligns and it's like, right, I can do the same thing I did yesterday and it feels fantastic. But we start to develop more of a toolbox. And I think, that's what you all do so beautifully for your clients, as well as you help them build a toolbox for navigating being human in the world. And that's what we do with movement as well, as we develop this toolbox that we can draw upon so that we don't feel like victims in our bodies. So we don't feel like we're fighting this human suit. We're actually moving with it. We're in response to it. We're in relationship with it through kindness. So I think that's the whole thing. I know that I've probably, hopefully not mucked up timing too badly here, but shall I throw it back to you, Jackie?
Sure, thanks, Erica. That was wonderful to hear a little bit about your personal kind of journey to get to this space and why kindness to self is so important in embracing movement as something beyond exercise. I think that's something that many of us can relate to. I think many of us working in the helping professions really do often switch off, maybe not from the head down, but maybe from the heart down. And we get so trapped in our bodies because we think we have to be static physically in response to others. So I think these short bursts of awareness of what we need and awareness of small ways that we can listen to and attend to our physical needs will make a big difference to our ability to show up for and to continue to be able to be present for ourselves as well as for others. So I really value everything that you've shared with us today. And in a moment, I'm going to invite you into a breakout room with a few other people to reflect on what this means for you. Any of those prompt questions maybe that Erica put up, which will be available as slides to you later today, about what this has meant for you and how you might be able to take away some of this to use for yourself or use even with some of your clients or other people that you support. How can you put this into practice in some way? When we come back from that breakout room, it'll be about 10 minutes. I'm going to invite a few people to share if you'd like to about what you discussed and also what you might have in terms of questions for Erica. So she's going to take questions after the breakout rooms. And then we've got some giveaways. So Erica's got a prize for all of you, access to some of the support work she does, but a very special prize for one person who'll be a winner of one of our 2 prizes for today. I've also got a $50 webinar to give away also when we come back from the break. Thank you for having that opportunity to have a chat with a couple of other people about what this presentation has meant for you. Would anybody like to reflect on this and share with others? How can you use any of what you've learned today or use it with others? Just give us a wave if you'd like to share and I'll ask you to unmute. Anybody like to share? Thanks, Antonia.
Yeah, I found it really useful, the discussion. I loved the breakout room, actually. It was really nice to share with other people what they found. I was in with Mary and Jean. And to perhaps incorporate some more slower movements is something that I wanted to take away from today's seminar, because I think I do a lot of that kind of cardio, got to burn it, and just to be able to, life feels very busy at the moment with running my own practice and 3 kids, to build it into slowing down sometimes, just giving myself permission to have a cup of tea outside and go, I don't have to be achieving anything right now. I could just do some breathing and I could maybe do a stretch or just look, gormlessly out somewhere without engaging in something all the time.
Wonderful suggestions. I'm really glad you can take that away today. Thanks, Antonia. Anyone else like to share what they're living with today from this presentation? Karen, thank you.
I feel this great sense of relief. Thank you very much. I really, really enjoyed your presentation. I do some movement sitting on the chair, but I had this incredible sense of, yes, it's okay just to do that instead of this certain amount of minutes or the rest of it. And I found that very empowering for me. So yes, more self-kindness. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Wonderful, Karen. Thank you for that reflection. I think kindness is about gentleness, really, isn't it? Gentleness to self and others. It's not this drivenness that we can embrace because it is a cultural imperative. So lovely to hear that. You've taken that away, Karen. Any other reflections or thoughts anybody would like to share? I can see some people have got some comments in the chat there, which is really lovely as well. Alison has said,
I'm just going to jump in. It's Claire here. Erica, thank you. Just seeing how you utilise the space and then being lucky enough to be paired with Karen, I could see how she used her space. So just integrating the movement in the not being stuck in the this of the Zoom. So, you know, sort of given me a completely different perspective of the movement. It's almost like the movement can become more integrated and conversational as opposed to being an instruction or something that needs to be done in the day, but just that spontaneous movement. So thank you for the opportunity to just reflect on that and come up with alternative ways to integrate movement more naturally. Yeah.
Far more organic. Thank you, Claire. Beautiful reflections. And I think lastly, Danielle, you also wanted to share something.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. And I just wanted to say that it's just beautiful to hear, because it reconfirms what I've already found out for myself, that we need to drop from our head into the body and, you know, get away from this constant thinking and the constant stream of thoughts and really ground ourselves and respond in any moment, well, if we can, that's, you know, practicable to our needs and what we are one day, we may and often are different the next, and responding to how we are as a human, like all of us here. And it's just amazing. Thank you for reconfirming all of this. I'm very passionate about it, so thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Danielle. Beautiful to hear. That's a reconfirmation of what you know and what your experience is. I'd also like to read out what Alison's written here. She shared that she'll be using the idea of movement as a possibility for self-care rather than just exercise with people she works with who are very energy or time poor. So I think that's lovely. And we've got our first question here in the chat. But if you do have other questions, again, feel free to either type them in or give us a wave if you'd like to ask Erica any questions in the few minutes that we have for this today. Alison asked, how can self-kindness look when there are chronic health issues as well?
This is a great question. And not surprisingly, the work that I do with people attracts a lot of people with chronic health issues. I work a lot with people with autoimmune conditions and other chronic health challenges, because it's the ultimate almost example of where we feel like our body is sort of defying what it's supposed to be doing. And I think the challenge that brings up is that it doesn't always make sense. You know, when we're faced with chronic health challenges that we can't necessarily even track back, like we so desperately want to know why things have happened. And so for me, in terms of the way that I work with this, I guess it's still the same. I mean, it's the same. We may not be able to use the same language, right? So if someone's like, well, I don't resonate with this idea that my body is always working for me, because that might be very hard to believe in the midst of a chronic health condition. But learning or exploring the idea that we are still worthy of kindness and compassion. And I think the thing that I sometimes think about in this context as well is that we can kind of either come from the belief, right, of choosing self-kindness and believing that is something we're worthy of, or we can start with the action and see what impact building that evidence has on the way that we feel, which is how I actually did it. I didn't feel worthy of kindness, so I started exploring with what happens if I do things that are kind. What impact does that have on the way that I feel? So I actually went that way, and it took a little bit of that for me to then be like, oh wow, okay, now I'm actually, you know, able to see this. So I now come at it from this perspective of I'm worthy of kindness and I want to have that relationship with myself, but I had to come from the other way first. And I think that's a very personal thing. But sort of getting the evidence of, oh, wow, when I treat myself with that kindness or compassion or with that gentleness, as Jackie said, what is the impact? And I think one thing we didn't talk about was the fact that, you know, your nervous system is the thing that's kind of gathering all this evidence, right, about how we are. And if we are constantly in this adversary relationship with ourselves, we're kind of like setting off our own fight or flight response, because it's like having someone at your front door abusing you and you're like, well, you're doing it to yourself. And so there's I guess the evidence kind of feeds the work. Because we start to realize that when we can meet ourselves with kindness, that we start to interrupt that pattern, I guess. Does that answer your question, Alison? I hope that's helpful. Yeah, okay. Any research articles about the body map and input output? The resource that I would recommend is there's a organisation in Australia or in Adelaide, I believe, called Explain Pain. They are wonderful and they have really good, simple resources. They've got resources to use with clients as well, if anyone's in that field. Explain Pain, the NOI group, so N for Nelly, O for Oscar, I for Indigo, NOI group. They do a lot of training around this sort of stuff, and they do have a lot of resources and a lot of YouTube clips and things explaining that the body map in the brain is called the homunculus. So it looks like a big tongue, big feet, big hands, tiny little body. So if you Google homunculus as well, you'll find some stuff. Yeah. Yes, Danielle.
Yes, Erica, I just wanted to ask, do you take on private clients? Do you see people? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'm jumping the gun a little bit on what Jackie was going to get me to do in a minute, but I work with people in 2 different ways. So I work with them one-on-one. And I also, beautiful, somebody's just found the Explain Pain. I work with people one-on-one, which is a little bit of a hybrid of movement and the mind stuff. And I work with people in groups. I have like an online membership where we work on this stuff.
Terrific. Yeah. I'd be very interested in exploring potentially something of that. Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, definitely reach out. I'm very, very easily accessed on the internet.
Okay,
so
good.
You can absolutely reach out and chat.
Terrific.
I'm always here to ask questions.
Thank you, Erica.
Conversation. Yeah.
Great question. Thanks, Danielle. And I'll be giving you all copies of Erica's contact details within half an hour today. So you can reach out to her if you want any more information, you had any more questions that you weren't able to ask or have answered today, or if you'd like to find out more about what she does. We've got a couple of things to go in the next 5 minutes before we finish up. We're going to give you the link at the end of this in a few minutes so you can create your own PD certificate, should you want that, for 1 hour for today. And we're also going to do a giveaway. We're going to have a little competition in a moment. We're going to play a piece of music, which you might recognise, and hopefully if you do, the first 2 people to put the name of the artist into the chat will win the 2 prizes today. So let me just explain what they are and what we've got coming up. So I'm just going to let you know about some of our upcoming events that you might be interested in attending, including our next free one that we've got like this. So tomorrow night, I'm running a workshop on a webinar for 90 minutes on sand tray therapy for those who are interested in looking at ways that we can use this metaphoric, playful way of working, not just with children, but with adolescents and adults as well. So there's a few spaces left in that one. There's on Wednesday night, the wonderful Professor Sue Jennings, who's a drama and play therapist from London, is going to be running therapeutic play for attachment issues in children 4 to 10. Next week, I've got another free information evening on our graduate certificate in play and art therapy. We've got places available for our March intake and our July intake next year, and I'll be explaining what that looks like. So that's free and available if you'd like to come along and hear about our 200-hour online course. We've got the wonderful Anne-Sue Lawrence presenting on creative arts programs for adult trauma survivors in mid-October, the 14th. And our next free event next month is using the voice for self-healing, and you can register for free online for that at the moment as well. So our fun and prizes. The person who puts the correct name of the artist in first will win access to this live webinar, Windows Through Grief, Helping Children Manage Loss, by Beate Stella, who's a clinical social worker and has worked in the grief and loss space for many years. And that's coming up in October. The second giveaway is going to be the Self-Kindness Hub, a free month inside this online membership that Erica runs, and that's valued at $49. It also includes a 15-minute call with Erica to discuss how to make the most of that package there. And in fact, anyone today who's attended gets access also to 50% off your first month membership inside the hub. So that's also $49. And that offer is available just until the end of this month. So, and you can contact Erica about that. Erica, do you want to say something briefly about that before we have our little competition?
Yeah. Yes, I'll just give you a brief idea of what actually that is, because it's not very descriptive, is it? So the Self-Kind Hub is basically my online, it's like an online movement studio, but we do classes in there. So there's a big library of classes, kind of similar to what we've done here today, but a lot of stuff getting on the floor, lots of somatic exercise sessions. So it's a fusion of somatics, yoga and Pilates, but all through that lens of self-kindness, all very gentle movement. So there's a library of classes, there's live classes that we do as well, and master classes. So we just had a master class on foot health with a natural podiatrist. We've got a one coming up next month all about somatics. And so I run like a full master class every month, as well as having those resources for actual, movement, ranging from 5-minute sessions all the way up through to 60. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. I know some of you will be interested in following that up. And as I said, I'll send you the links to all those later today. So Ellie's going to play a piece of music. It's only going to be for about 10 or 15 seconds. But if you know it, you'll know it. So all you need to do is put the name of the artist, the person singing this, into the chat. And the first 2 people will be our prize winners for today. And as soon as we've given those out, then we're also going to put in the link there also. So fantastic. Thank you. Lovely feedback coming in. All right, Ellie, over to you. Get your typing hand ready for the chat there.
You can't say anything, Jackie?
No, can't say anything, but we know you're
Good.
sharing the screen. Anyone know it? Ah, Paula, you got it. All right. So, okay. Sylvia, oh, close, but all right. So we've got one winner. Alison, okay, you'll be our second winner there too. That's very sneaky. All right. I'm going to let Paula and Alison know how they can access their prizes. Thank you very much for attending today. Ellie's also going to put into the chat right now. Thank you, Ellie, for your support today. And thank you especially to Erica for this fantastic presentation today. I can see lots of appreciation in the chat there for you, and I know people would like to follow you up after today as well. So thank you all for being here, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again, Erica. Bye now.